Do we have any questions, probably specific questions to any speaker or any general questions? Gentleman here, please. Use your own microphone, press the button, I think, is the key thing.
Ben Lynch, Cleantech Capital Advisors. Thank you, Alberto. Looks like a great sort of product, etc. The prices you quoted for like between 4 and 10k per unit, depending on sort of 1k or 10k volumes, what would the end user price be? Obviously, there's different models to how it's delivered, but let's assume it was installed by somebody and there's installation cost and facilities and all that sort of stuff. What do you think the final end user cost would be for that 2.5 kilowatt system?
Okay. For that, the number that we use is the difference or the marginal difference between installing, let's say, a conventional gas boiler or a condensing boiler and the cogeneration function, because we don't want to mix the cost of the water storage or other ancillaries that are there, even if there is no fuel cell. And based on the market analysis of our partners, and our partners are people selling boilers and analyzing this market, to put it like this, life begins when an end customer has not to pay more than 3,000-4,000 per kilowatt to install. And the party begins when you go below 3. So at these numbers, the market is large. At higher numbers, there is a market, but it's, of course, you start from the top of the pyramid and you go down. So the indicative number is for an end user, and I say without additional subsidies, with what is available today, with the incentive that are available today, I would even say starting at 5,000, 4,000 per kilowatt, the market starts. At below 4, at 3, it explodes for that particular application. For large power plants, it's a little bit lower, but for domestic, it can be higher.
So you think, well, the channel will ultimately decide the price that it's sold at, that it would be somewhere in that 3,000 to 5,000 per.
Yeah, that's what our partners selling boilers and selling today, Stirling engine and other cogeneration. They start to market their units at 10,000 per kilowatt. And they say, this is the market entry. There are people buying it at this price, but there are not many. If as soon as we come close to 5, it will grow a lot. If you go below 5, it will explode. That's what they tell us.
Thank you. A question, just gentleman at the edge of the row, please.
With the bright red tie, if it makes it easier. David Hart, E4Tech. More of a comment, really. It was something that Simon said, and I agree with a large amount of what you said, Simon, but I think it's worth pointing out that there are a whole range of ways of producing hydrogen, and your well-to-wheel numbers seem to focus rather more on grid electrolysis than on others. And so there are, I think, very significant studies that show you can go a long way to reducing CO2 from fuel cell vehicles in the near term by an order of magnitude almost. And it may be that Ian wishes to pick this up in his previous incarnation or with his European Hydrogen Association affiliation, but I just wanted to make it clear that that's sort of one view of where we could go. It's not wrong, but it's only one.
Who wants to take that first, Simon, or do you?
No, I totally agree, and I think it's a case of having 15 minutes to put over an argument and purposefully trying to be slightly contrarian. So yeah, totally agree. That's probably the worst case scenario. Really was to illustrate that we often hear comment that hydrogen is a zero carbon fuel. And I think I was just trying to make the point here that it isn't necessarily so, and that we've got to remember that when we're looking at the economic and the other benefits of fuel cells. But thanks for the comment. Totally agree.
Ian, do you want to pick up on that? And can I just ask you, and I met Air Products recently, I should say, and they were talking about the waste-to-tricity project, and it was fascinating, actually. But one of the things that they said was that they sort of admitted that there were probably only a few of those, a handful probably in the UK of that sort of scale. I don't know if that's a fair comment, so maybe you want to pick it up from there.
Yeah, there are two very diverse comments there, I suppose. In terms of the hydrogen availability and the well-to-wheel analysis, you pick your route and you can take your numbers, really. I mean, there are very, very different, diverse methods of producing hydrogen, and that's what makes it attractive at the end of the day. And in my previous guise at Air Products, I ran their hydrogen energy group for 10 years. We're aware of we were aware of 90% of the, I think, ways and means of producing those hydrogen molecules, and not all of them are cost effective. And probably the least cost effective one today is grid-connected electrolysis. So you would move, you would take your time to move towards that, as opposed to maybe putting it up as an example for comparison with diesel at this point in time, I would suggest. But I agree, Simon, there are lots of ways of cutting that cake. In terms of the project up in Teesside, which Air Products announced a few months ago, I was responsible for gaining planning permission and all of the environmental permissions for that plant. That's a waste-to-energy plant where it uses advanced plasma processing of the waste to obtain a syngas. That syngas obviously is really like the output from a steam methane reformer at the end of the day, and you could take that gas stream through to hydrogen and power either vehicles or alternatively, hopefully, stationary fuel cells. So at the moment Air Products plans are to put the majority of that syngas into gas turbines and produce power at, say, 40%, maybe slightly higher efficiency. But they have planned a test bed on that system to allow fuel cells to be tested as an alternative to the actual turbines, to hopefully get to maybe 60%. And I know that doesn't sound like a great deal of difference in terms of what you're looking at in the numbers between 40 and 60, but in terms of megawatts out the door, let's say, that's a 49, just under 50 megawatt plant. It will mean that the amount of megawatts escalates to just under 70 megawatts. That's all at Double Rocks. Okay? So Double Rocks in the UK receives a power price of £150 a megawatt. It's a massive win for that project if they can go fuel cells. So they, along with many other large companies, are very interested in pursuing it. Sorry, there was a question on the number of opportunities.
I guess my point is really, if there's going to be this debate about where does the hydrogen come from, and obviously the hydrogen in that case is coming from effectively a renewable source. How much renewable hydrogen is there on that sort of scale versus, the sort of smaller distributed type products that we were talking about maybe earlier today, the sort of ITM, localized refuel or whatever it might be.
Okay, so the amount of hydrogen that will come off of that plant if you directed it all to hydrogen is something like 30 or 40 tons a day. Okay, it's not a small plant, it's a big investment. I think it's about £250 million worth of investment. How many can go in the UK? It's not really the waste stream that stops the number being built. It's the number of sites you can do it on. Because, Air Products, a big American company, they like to build things big. Okay? We, in England or in the UK, tend to not really like these massive industrial complexes to be built in our backyard. So you have to find the right geographical location to put in an appropriate sized waste plant. We also don't like our waste being transported from one end of the country to another, so we like these to be localised. So when AP say that there's not that many, it's not because it's limited by the amount of waste, it's limited by the geographical implications that the UK has. Now, I would say that you can cite up to 5 on the location where they've currently got their first one installed. that can handle 5,000 tonnes a day of waste. That's significant. Okay, but you have to bring the waste to that location rather than it being a more distributed site. So I don't think the waste is an issue. I think that it is one source of potential hydrogen going forward. Obviously, as a stationary fuel cell company, I would like to use some of those molecules to put it into the grid as opposed to necessarily providing it for vehicle transportation.
Thanks. Hugo, would you like to?
Yes, I just wanted to pick up on David's comment with a bit of concern about relevant metrics because, of course, what we're interested in is CO2 per kilometre, and routinely all fuels are compared with each other on the CO2 intensity per kilojoule. But if you go further per kilojoule of one form of energy rather than another, it's not a very relevant metric. And certainly we believe that with hydrogen, well, we've demonstrated with hydrogen you can go far further per kilojoule than you can with other fuels. So we're talking about a figure of just over 30 grams per kilometre using hydrogen from natural gas at the moment. It's very easy to produce, of course, a highly inefficient fuel cell car, and there's plenty of them about.
Can we just take probably one more question, and gentleman in the middle on my left, please.
Hello. Mike Dolman from Element Energy. This question is probably mainly directed towards Hugo, but welcome comments from anyone else. You mentioned, Hugo, in your talk, the concept of selling mobility rather than cars. And I know this is an idea that's possibly not new in some other industries, for example, aerospace, aero engines, moving towards power by the hour rather than selling jet engines. I just wondered whether you've tested the kind of appetite for that, amongst consumers. So how easy or difficult do you think it would be? Because that kind of business model, it strikes me, might become increasingly important for renewable and low-carbon technologies characterised by high capital costs but low running costs.
Well, we haven't done formal customer research. We believe very sincerely that it's not possible to get valid results from researching something that people don't have any experience of. Having said that, we are increasingly buying services rather than products, and it happens in many areas of life, business to consumer as well as B2B. So we don't see that as a problem. There are cultural trends, they're happening slowly, and one of the great beauties of being a startup is that you don't need 90% of the customers out there to like what you're after. As long as 5% like what you're offering, then you've got a market. And clearly there is a trend away from saddling oneself with wasting capital assets.
I think, well, the EV charging is another area where there's a sort of, a lot still to, the jury's out really. I mean, who knows where we're going to end up on EV and batteries. So hydrogen's that bit further away. Who knows where we're going to end up. So unless there are any really burning final questions, I think we're going to close it here and try and catch up a little bit of time. Thank you all very much. Thank you to our panellists. And we'll have a short coffee break and we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Thank you.